The rain came down hard on Brooklyn that Tuesday night. Ji-hoon Kwan sat alone in a corner booth of a small diner on Atlantic Avenue. A man who controlled half of New York's underground, sitting under flickering lights, watching his 7-year-old son pick at a plate of fries in silence. He was still watching Eli when the door opened. The wind came in first, then the rain, then her. She didn't rush inside the way wet people usually did. She walked in like she had decided to shoulders straight, chin level work boots worn at the heel. Beside her, gripping her hand with both of hers, was a little girl with wide, dark eyes that took in everything. Ji-hoon looked up. He did not look away. He had spent his entire adult life reading people in 3 seconds flat. He looked at this woman soaked through tired carrying something heavy that she refused to put down, and reached a conclusion he hadn't expected. Unbreakable. He had no idea what her name was, no idea what she had carried through that door beside the rain, no idea that this Tuesday night in Brooklyn was already the kind of night that changes everything. He was about to find out. Hey, if you're watching this right now, do not click away. Slow burn. Real tension. 2 people who should never have met and couldn't stay apart. Stay with me till the end. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. New stories every week. Now. Back to Brooklyn. 3 hours before he walked into that diner, Ji-hoon Kwan had ended a meeting that no one would ever write down. The warehouse in Queens was the kind of place that didn't exist on any city map. No signage, no registered address, just a building that people in certain circles knew to find when they needed to. Ji-hoon had arrived at 9. By 9:45, everything that needed to be said had been said. The 3 men across the table had nodded without speaking, which was the only correct response. One of them had made the mistake of pushing back in the first 5 minutes. Ji-hoon had looked at him, just looked, and the man had not spoken again. This was the world Ji-hoon Kwan had built. Precise, controlled, costly to enter and impossible to leave without his permission. He drove himself afterward. The city moved past the windows bridges lit over the East River, late traffic rain beginning in earnest, and then his phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Dad, what time are you coming home? 7 words from Eli. Ji-hoon read them twice. Then he pulled off at the next exit, drove 3 blocks into Brooklyn, and stopped at the first diner with lights on. He told himself it was just dinner. Eli had been with Ji-hoon for 4 years. The boy's mother had been someone Ji-hoon owed a debt he could never repay, a debt with nothing to do with money and everything to do with a decision he'd made at 28 when he was certain he understood the cost of things. He had been wrong. When Eli arrived at his door at age 3, small and quiet, holding a stuffed bear with one ear missing, Ji-hoon understood for the first time what it meant to be responsible for something that couldn't protect itself. He had not been a natural father. He wasn't warm in the ways children needed. Warmth didn't do voices during bedtime stories, forgot school pickup twice in the first month. But he showed up, every day in every way he knew how. And Eli, serious, watchful Eli, had decided somewhere along the way that this was enough. Tonight, across the diner table, Eli ate his fries one at a time and didn't ask where they were or why they weren't home. Ji-hoon watched him and thought not for the first time that this child was already too much like him, that it might be too late to change that. He was still thinking it when the door opened. Naomi Carter had been awake since 5 that morning. 7 phone calls before 6 a.m., all to construction site supervisors, all ending the same way. Nothing today. Try again Thursday. The rain had shut down 3 sites in Brooklyn and 2 in the Bronx. 4th cancellation this week. She had done the math twice in her dark kitchen while Maya slept. The numbers did not add up. She was $31 short of this month's electricity bill. She didn't tell Maya this. She never told Maya anything that would change the way her daughter looked at the world, open and curious and completely unafraid. That look on Maya's face was the thing Naomi protected above everything else, above her own hunger, above the exhaustion that had settled so deep into her shoulders, she sometimes forgot what it felt like not to carry it. So when Maya woke up and asked if they could go get food, Naomi counted what was in her wallet and said yes. They walked 6 blocks in the rain because the bus fare was $1.75 each way, and Naomi had already decided that money was going toward Maya's dinner. She pushed open the diner door and walked in. She did not look around for sympathy, did not let the warmth of the room show on her face. She walked to the counter the way she always walked anywhere, like she had come here on purpose, like she had every right, like the worn heels of her boots were nobody's business. Maya pressed against her side, quiet now eyes moving across the room. Then Maya's eyes stopped. At the corner booth, a boy about her age was watching her back. Eli and Maya regarded each other with the direct, uncomplicated assessment, only children manage no performance, no pretense. Just two people deciding whether the other one was interesting. Maya decided first. She leaned up to Naomi's ear. "Mama, that boy has a lot of fries." "I see that. He's not eating them." But it was already too late. Eli had looked down at his plate, then back at Maya, and with the gravity of someone making a considered decision, pushed the plate to the edge of the table closest to her. No wave, no smile, just the plate and a steady look that said, "These are available if you want them." Maya looked at her mother. Naomi had gone still. She had been aware of the man in the corner booth since she walked in, impossible not to be. He had a presence that took up more space than his body, a stillness that wasn't relaxed but controlled. She had filed him under "not my business" and kept her eyes forward. Now she felt him watching her. She turned. Ji-hoon Kwon was already standing. He crossed the diner in a few unhurried steps and stopped at a careful distance close enough to speak quietly, far enough to make clear he wasn't crowding her. He looked at her directly and said 4 words. "Sit with us, please." Not a command. Not quite. Something in between the voice of a man who had learned that please worked better than the alternative and hadn't fully decided which one he meant tonight. Naomi looked at him for a long moment, then at Eli, then at Maya, whose eyes said everything a 6-year-old couldn't say out loud. "We don't need anything," Naomi said. "I know," Ji-hoon said. He said nothing else, didn't push, didn't explain, just waited with the patience of someone who understood that silence was more persuasive than words and let her decide. It was the waiting that got her. Every man who had ever tried to help Naomi Carter had done it loudly, made sure she knew what it cost them, what she owed. This man just waited, like her answer was her own. "Fine," she said. 10 minutes. They sat down. The 10 minutes became an hour, and Ji-hoon Kwon, who had spent 3 hours that night making men afraid of him, spent the rest of the evening watching a woman refuse to be impressed by anything, and found to his complete bewilderment that he could not stop. The following Sunday came in gray and cold, the kind of November morning that made Brooklyn feel smaller than it was. Naomi had not planned to go to Central Park. She had told herself on the walk home from the diner 6 days ago that the evening had been a one-time thing, a coincidence of weather and hunger and 2 children who happened to be the same age. She had $31 to find before Thursday and a callback to make to a site supervisor in the Bronx, and absolutely no room in her life for something she couldn't calculate the cost of. She had been very clear with herself about all of this. And then Maya had woken up Saturday morning, picked up the small red toy car that Eli had pressed into her hands as they left the diner, and driven it carefully along the windowsill while making engine sounds under her breath. "When are we seeing Eli again?" Naomi had looked at her daughter's back, at the careful way Maya held that car like it was something worth being careful with. "Maybe soon," she said. Sunday morning, they took the subway to Central Park. Ji-hoon arrived early, the way he arrived everywhere, position-assessed exits. Noted. Old habit. He sat on a bench near the path while Eli ran immediately for the climbing structure, burning off the energy of a child who had been patient all week and was done being patient now. Ji-hoon checked his phone. Put it away. Checked it again. 40 minutes passed. Eli's energy slowed. He came back to the bench and sat beside Ji-hoon's shoulders, dropping in the way that meant he was working through something he didn't have words for yet. "Maybe they're busy," Eli said quietly. Ji-hoon looked at his son and said nothing. because there was nothing to say that wouldn't be a lie or a deflection, and Eli was too sharp for either. Then Jihoon looked up. Naomi was walking through the park entrance with Maya on her back, the little girl's arms around her mother's neck, both of them slightly breathless cheeks flushed from the cold. Naomi was scanning the path ahead with the look of someone who had made a decision and was following through before she could talk herself out of it. Eli was off the bench before Jihoon could say anything. Maya saw him coming, shrieked, and launched herself off Naomi's back to run toward him. They met in the middle of the path, and both started talking at once, the fast, overlapping speech of children with too much to catch up on and no interest in taking turns. Jihoon walked over to where Naomi had stopped. She was watching the children with something he hadn't seen at the diner, something softer, less guarded, like Maya running toward someone had undone a small knot in her chest. Jihoon stood beside her and said nothing for a moment. Then, without looking at her, he took off his coat. "Don't," Naomi said immediately. "You're cold." "I'm fine." "You've been cold since you walked in." He held the coat out, still watching the children. "I run warm. It costs me nothing." A silence. Then Naomi took the coat. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. They stood side by side and watched Eli show Maya a shortcut through the climbing structure he had clearly been saving for this exact moment. They ended up on the bench together, not by arrangement, just by the natural gravity of two people watching the same two children. Jihoon asked about her work. Not the way people asked when they wanted to seem interested, the way someone asked when they actually wanted to know. Specific questions. What kind of sites? What the work involved. Naomi answered carefully at first, then less carefully. She told him about teaching herself to read blueprints on weekends using library books, because no one on any crew was going to teach the one woman who showed up asking for work. She told him about the site supervisor who had given her a chance 3 years ago, and how she had made sure he never regretted it. Jihoon listened, fully, without filling silences or steering the conversation back toward himself. Naomi noticed. She didn't mention it. "What about you?" she said. "What kind of business?" "Real estate development." "Big, large enough?" She looked at him sideways. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." She let it go, something she didn't usually do. There was something in the way he said it, not evasive, exactly, more like a door that was closed but not locked, that made her file it away rather than press. They sat in comfortable silence watching the children construct an elaborate race course from sticks and leaves for the small red car. "He doesn't usually do that," Jihoon said quietly. "What? Talk that much? Eli." He watched his son narrate the race course rules to Maya with unusual animation. "He's usually very quiet." "Maya won't let him be quiet," Naomi said. "She doesn't believe in it." The corner of Jihoon's mouth moved, just slightly, the closest thing to a smile she had seen from him. And Naomi, who had been carefully not thinking about this man all week, felt something shift in her chest. Small, inconvenient. She looked away first. When it was time to leave, Jihoon stood and held his coat out. "Keep it," he said, "until next week." "That assumes there's a next week." "There will be." Not arrogant, just certain, the same tone as his pleas at the diner, sitting somewhere between a statement and a question and refusing to be just one or the other. Naomi took the coat. She told herself it was just because it was cold. Walking to the subway, Maya on her back chattering about the race course, Naomi felt the weight of the coat around her shoulders and thought about the way Jihoon watched Eli when he thought no one was looking, like he was afraid of failing him, like he was trying every single day not to. She knew that feeling. She had lived inside it for 6 years. She did not know what to do with the fact that she recognized it in him. She found out on a Wednesday. Naomi had been at the laundromat on Fulton Street waiting for the dryer cycle to finish scrolling through her phone with the half-attention of someone who had 20 minutes and nothing urgent to fill them with. A news notification. She almost scrolled past it. Then she saw the name. Kwon Group, CEO Jihoon. Kwon questioned in connection with ongoing federal investigation into organized crime network, operating across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. She read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on the plastic chair beside her and sat very still for a long moment, listening to the dryer turn. She thought about the warehouse meeting he hadn't mentioned, the driver who was always outside. The way certain men in that diner had shifted when he walked in that first night. She hadn't consciously registered it at the time, but she registered it now. The slight change in posture, the eyes that went down, the particular stillness of people who knew exactly who they were in the presence of. She had filed all of it under Not My Business. She picked up her phone and read the article in full. By the time the dryer stopped, she had made a decision. Getting into Kwon Group's offices was not supposed to be easy. Naomi did it anyway. She walked into the lobby on Park Avenue in her work clothes, the same jacket she'd worn in the rain boots still scuffed at the heel, and looked at the front desk with the expression she used on construction sites when a foreman tried to tell her she was in the wrong place. The receptionist tried twice to redirect her. Naomi waited him out both times. She gave her name. She said she was there to see Ji-hoon Kwon. She did not sit down when he suggested it. She sat down anyway 20 minutes later when it became clear that standing was not going to make Ji-hoon appear faster. But she sat the way she always sat, straight, composed, like she had chosen to be here, and had no doubts about that choice. Ji-hoon came out of the elevator 40 minutes later. He saw her immediately. Something crossed his face, not surprise exactly, more like a man recognizing the thing he had been half expecting and still wasn't fully prepared for. He walked over. "Naomi." She stood. "We need to talk." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded once and led her to a side room off the lobby glass walls, a long table, the kind of space designed for conversations that needed to stay contained. He closed the door. She didn't wait for him to speak. "Ji-hoon Kwon, federal investigation, organized crime." She laid the words on the table between them, no drama, no accusation in her tone, just the facts doing their own work. "Is it true?" He looked at her steadily. "Which part? Any of it?" A pause. Short, but she caught it. "The investigation exists," he said. "I was questioned. I was released. That's all the article says because that's all there is to report." "That's not what I'm asking." He held her gaze, and he didn't answer immediately, not because he was calculating she could tell the difference by now, but because he was deciding how honest to be. That distinction mattered to her. She waited. "I run a legitimate business," he said finally. "Kwon Group is real. The buildings, the contracts, all of it is real. But I came from somewhere before that. And that somewhere doesn't disappear just because I built something over it." The room was very quiet. "Does what you came from put my daughter at risk?" Her voice didn't change. It didn't need to. The question was the whole weight of everything. Something moved in his expression, brief and unguarded, the first time she had seen him look anything other than controlled. "No, I would never." "You don't get to never," she said. "You can't make that promise. You know you can't." He said nothing, because she was right, and he knew it, and he was not going to lie to her face. That was the thing that made it worse somehow. She had half expected him to push back, to reassure her with the smooth certainty of someone used to managing difficult conversations. Instead, he just absorbed it, stood there, and let her be right without flinching. She picked up her bag. "Don't come to the park on Sunday." She was almost to the door when it opened. A woman walked in tailored dress heels that cost more than Naomi's monthly rent, the particular ease of someone who had never once wondered whether she belonged in a room. She took in Naomi in a single glance. The kind of glance that calculated everything in under a second and found it lacking. Then she turned to Ji-hoon with a practiced smile. "Sorry to interrupt. The Mercer Street partners are upstairs." A pause, deliberate, just long enough. "Should I tell them to wait while you finish with—" She gestured slightly toward Naomi, the gesture completing the sentence she hadn't bothered to say out loud. The room went still. Ji-hoon turned to look at the woman. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move, just looked at her with that stillness, the controlled, absolute stillness that meant the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. Rebecca. Quiet. Cancel the Mercer Street meeting. Tell them I'll reschedule. A beat. And clear your afternoon. We need to revisit your contract. Rebecca's smile didn't disappear, but something behind it did. She nodded once and left. Ji-hoon turned back to Naomi. Naomi looked at him. She was not softened. She had fought her own battles long enough not to need anyone to fight them for her. But she had seen the way he did it. No performance, no grand gesture designed to impress her. Just a swift, quiet, non-negotiable correction, like it was simply the only acceptable response. That didn't change anything, she said. I know, he said. She walked out. He stood in the empty room for a long time after she left. The glass walls reflected him back at himself, composed still exactly as controlled as he always appeared, but his hands at his sides had closed into fists, and Ji-hoon Kwon, who had not lost something he wanted in longer than he could remember, understood for the first time in years what it felt like to watch a door close and not be able to stop it. 2 weeks passed. Naomi filled them the way she always filled difficult stretches with work with Maya, with the specific discipline of not sitting still long enough to feel anything she wasn't ready to feel. She picked up a 4-day job in the Bronx. She fixed the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink herself. She took Maya to the library 3 times, to the community center twice, to the park at the end of their block where she could watch her daughter run without thinking about Central Park or a man who listened like he meant it. Maya asked about Eli on day 3, then day 7. Then she stopped asking which was worse. On day 11, Maya sat at the kitchen table and drew a picture 2 children standing in a park made of brown loops that Naomi eventually identified as leaves. She taped it to the refrigerator without a word, smoothed the edges carefully with her palm, and went back to her crayons. Naomi stood in the doorway and looked at that picture for a long time. She still didn't call. She first noticed the man on Thursday evening, walking home from the subway after a late shift past the bodega, past the dry cleaner down her block. A man in a dark jacket outside her building. When she turned onto the street, he straightened slightly, and something about that adjustment, practiced attentive, made the hair on her neck rise. She kept her pace even. She went upstairs. She told herself it was nothing. Friday evening, a different man. Same corner, same posture. Saturday afternoon, she caught a third in the reflection of a store window behind her, by half a block adjusting direction when she adjusted direction. She stood on Atlantic Avenue and understood with cold clarity that this was not random. Someone had decided she was useful, not as a person as leverage. She stared at Ji-hoon's number for 30 seconds, put her phone back in her pocket. She was not going to call him. She was not going to become someone who needed to be rescued. She had handled everything in her life alone, and she was not about to stop now. She checked the lock on her door twice that night. She did not sleep well. Sunday evening. Maya had been asleep for 20 minutes when Naomi heard something in the hallway. Not loud, just a sound that wasn't the building settling. She stood in the kitchen without moving, listening. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. 4 words. Don't go outside tonight. Before she could respond, she heard voices in the hallway, low, terse, then a silence that felt different, more complete, then footsteps moving away. She crossed to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, except for one thing. Ji-hoon Kwon was standing at the far end of the corridor, hands in his pockets, back to her door, not moving, not leaving, like a man who had decided this was where he needed to be. Naomi stood at the peephole for a long moment, then she opened the door. Ji-hoon turned. His jacket was wet, he had been outside in the rain. His expression was controlled as always, but something underneath it was pulled tight. There were 2 of them, he said. They're gone. Who sent them? Someone who wanted to send me a message, he said, using the nearest available point of pressure. A pause. You. Naomi held the doorframe. You've been watching my building. Yes. Since when? Since the day you walked out of my office. You didn't tell me. You told me not to come to the park, he said. You didn't say anything about keeping you safe. It was not a clever answer. It was not designed to be. It was just exactly what he meant, said plainly, and that more than anything else was what made her step back from the door. Not all the way, but enough. Jihoon didn't move forward. He waited wet jacket and careful eyes and let her decide. Come in, she said. Maya's asleep. They sat in her small kitchen, the one with the fixed pipe and the drawing on the refrigerator. Jihoon's eyes went to the drawing once. 2 children in a park of brown loops. He looked at it briefly, then looked away. Naomi put water on. Not because she wanted tea, because having something to do with her hands made the conversation easier. Tell me the truth, she said back still to him. All of it. He told her. It took a long time. He told her about the network he had built before Quan Group existed, not with pride, not with shame, just with the flat accuracy of someone recounting facts. He told her about Eli's mother, about the decision that cost her everything, about the 4 years since building something worth the cost of what he had destroyed. He told her he was not a good man in the way that word was usually meant, but that he had stopped being a certain kind of bad man, and the distance between those 2 things was the only thing he had to offer. He told her the people watching her building were handled, permanently, that it would not happen again. Naomi turned and looked at him across the small kitchen. I don't want a guard or someone watching my building, she said. I want to walk down my own street without calculating risk. Can you give me that? He held her gaze. I'm working on it. I won't say it's done, but I'm working on it. The water boiled. She didn't move to take it off. Outside rain against the window. The same rain from the night they met, the night she had told herself it would only be 10 minutes, and none of it would matter. She looked at Jihoon in her small kitchen wet jacket and honest eyes, and thought about the drawing on the refrigerator. The rain's not stopping, she said. Jihoon looked at her. You can stay until it does. Not a declaration, just a door opened an inch. The same door that had moved in his chest the first night he watched her walk through the rain. He nodded once, and stayed. Jihoon woke up on Naomi's couch at 6 a.m. For a moment he didn't move, just lay there in the gray early light listening to the apartment. The refrigerator hum, rain still against the window lighter now, and somewhere down the hall, small feet on a wooden floor. Maya appeared in the doorway wearing pajamas with cartoon planets and holding a cup of orange juice with both hands, the careful grip of a child transporting something important. She looked at Jihoon on the couch with the direct, unsurprised assessment of a 6-year-old who had already decided this was fine. You stayed, she said. I stayed, he confirmed. She crossed the room and sat at the other end of the couch, still holding her juice. She studied him with the patience of someone who had a serious question and intended to ask it. Do you like my mama? The question landed without decoration. She expected a real answer. Yes, he said. Maya nodded slowly, the nod of someone whose suspicion had been confirmed. Eli misses me. He doesn't say it, but I know. He does, Jihoon said. He drew a picture of you. He won't tell me what it is, but I know. Maya considered this carefully. Then she held her juice toward him, an offering. Jihoon accepted it, took a small sip, handed it back. Maya settled into the cushion with the quiet satisfaction of a person who had conducted a successful negotiation and was at peace with the result. When Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway a few minutes later, she found Jihoon and Maya sitting on opposite ends of the couch, watching the rain in companionable silence. She stood in the doorway without speaking. Something moved across her face, brief and unguarded, the same thing that moved across it whenever Maya ran toward someone with her arms open. A knot somewhere deep, loosening just slightly. There's coffee, she said finally, and went back into the kitchen. Jihoon followed. They stood at her counter with their coffee, and the morning coming in gray through the window. The rain had slowed to almost nothing. Brooklyn was beginning outside a delivery truck music from somewhere above the ordinary sounds of a city that had decided to start again. Ji-hoon looked at the drawing on the refrigerator one last time. 2 children. A park of brown loops. I don't know how to do this, he said. Naomi looked at him over her cup. She waited. I know how to walk into a room and make every person in it understand the situation without saying a word. I know how to protect things. He paused. I don't know how to be someone who is safe to be around. I never learned how. I'm not certain it's something I'm capable of learning. The kitchen was very quiet. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since a Tuesday night in Brooklyn when you walked into a diner like you owned it and couldn't afford the meal. He set his cup down. And I know that when I'm around you, I want to be different. Not better for you, I'm not asking for that. Just better. Naomi set her cup down too. I grew up being told that wanting too much was dangerous, she said, that expecting things to work out was a luxury I didn't have. I stopped believing that a long time ago I had to for Maya. She looked at him directly. Believing it for myself is harder. Ji-hoon held still. I don't need you to be safe, she said. I need you to be honest. Every time about everything. Can you do that? Yes, he said. I know, she said quietly. That's what scares me. And then for the first time in any room they had ever been in together, she was the one who moved first. Not far. Just enough to rest her hand on the counter beside his, her fingers close to his without touching. An inch of space between them that felt like a question. Ji-hoon looked down at her hand, then up at her face. He turned his hand over slowly. Palm up. An offering, not a claim. Naomi looked at it for one long moment, long enough that the question in that inch of space became something else, a choice made clearly with full knowledge of what it meant. Then she put her hand in his. 6 months later, the apartment was in Brooklyn. Larger than her old one, smaller than anything Ji-hoon had previously lived in, on a quiet street 3 blocks from the library Maya had declared her favorite place on earth. It had been Naomi's requirement. He hadn't argued. He had learned over 6 months which things were worth arguing about, and the answer was almost never the things he had previously assumed. On a Saturday morning in May, Ji-hoon stood at the kitchen window with his coffee and listened to the apartment wake up around him. Maya's voice high and precise narrating an elaborate game to Eli. Eli's quieter voice negotiating the terms. The sound of Cartoon's toast and Naomi's footsteps purposeful, unhurried the walk of someone who moved through the world entirely on her own terms and had decided deliberately to let him walk beside her. She appeared at the window with her own coffee and stood there looking at Brooklyn with him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. What are you thinking? She asked. Ji-hoon looked at the street below, at Naomi beside him, her shoulder against his arm. That I almost didn't stop at that diner, he said. A pause. I almost didn't go in, she said. He turned to look at her. She was already looking at him. I'm glad you did, he said. Naomi held his gaze for a moment. Then slowly and entirely on her own terms, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Me too, she said. In the living room, Maya's voice rose briefly. Eli, the car goes on the track, followed by Eli's low murmur, followed by silence, followed by the small sound of 2 children settling back into their game. Outside, Brooklyn carried on the way it always did, loud and indifferent, and completely unaware that in a quiet apartment 3 blocks from the library, something real and carefully built was holding. And that's where we leave them, not at a grand gesture, not at a designed moment. Just 2 people at a kitchen window on a Saturday morning in Brooklyn, shoulder to shoulder, watching a city that never made anything easy for either of them. Naomi Carter walked through a storm with $31 her daughter's hand and her chin level. She didn't ask anyone for anything. She built her life out of early mornings' hard work and the fierce, quiet love she had for a little girl who drew pictures of her friends and taped them to the refrigerator. Ji-hoon Kwon spent years building walls so high that even he couldn't see over them. And then a woman looked at him, not up at him, not around him, directly at him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do. Who stayed with you more, Naomi's strength or Ji-hoon learning what it means to stay? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And tell me, have you ever let someone in when everything in you said, keep the door closed? What made you open it? If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe for new stories every week. Like this video. Leave a comment. We'll see you next time.
And that's where their story takes its turn, but the love in the shadow is never truly over. If this story made your heart race, hit the like button and subscribe to Korean Mafia Heart, where every love story is dangerous, passionate, and impossible to forget. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Now, tell me in the comment, are you team him or team her? Who do you think she will choose in the end? Stay with me. On Korean Mafia Heart, love is the most dangerous game of all.